Welcome everyone. Fred Blake here with Bill DeWeese, talking about how if you have a background in the ministry, you're a pastor, that this might be something to consider. So Bill, say hi to our guests.
Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome. Good to have you here tonight. Coming to
And
you live from my studio bunker in an obscure rural location in Illinois.
sounds good. Let's have maybe tell us, we have Nelene's from Portland. Joe, just tell us where you're from, and maybe if you do pastoral work part or full-time, just curious. Full-time, part-time, where are you from? Put that in the question box and I'll be able to see it. If not, I won't. That's a definite no possibility then. As I have a sip of water here, sorry. So again, in the question box is where you'll both put questions and comments. That way I can see them and relay them to Bill. We will start exactly at the top of the hour here. And again, question box is for you there. People are shy, Bill. I don't know what to tell you.
They came to listen, not to communicate, I guess.
Okay.
But hey, we'd love to know who you are, where you're located.
Jason, Mr. Schwartz from Part-Time Street Ministry. I like that.
Oh, nice.
Troy. Okay. Gotcha. So it's top of the hour here, Bill. Let's go ahead and get started and not hold up anybody for being here on time.
All right, and I'm going to turn off my camera here now that you guys know I'm here. And I am Bill DeWeese, and welcome to this webinar, Pastor to Voice Talent. And it's designed as an informational webinar, but you'll notice there would be built in a lot of time for your questions. On a daily basis, I receive more questions than I can respond to. When you look at social media and email, I mean, I could spend full time just answering questions, but I like to do these because I know that people who come to these are very serious about voiceover, and I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions and get some interaction. So, and again, if you would feel so led, we would love to know, again, who you are, what kind of ministry you're involved in, and where you're located. Just put that in the question box. It just gives us an idea of, of what's going on. So, who is this webinar for? Well, we're going to cast a very broad net when it comes to ministry work. You could be a pastor, a priest, a rabbi, etc., a youth pastor, a worship leader. You could be a Sunday school teacher or some sort of religious leader or teacher. But why specifically religious type leaders and teachers? Well, what I've been doing a series of these informational webinars, and I've really been focusing on the things that I know from my background that have been a huge influence in helping me to be successful as a voiceover talent. And a big part of my background is ministry work. I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. But the one thing I can tell you about people who work in pastoral work or ministry work of any sort is that you understand how to communicate with emotion. If you're involved in spiritual work and ministerial work, you no doubt are a very mission and purpose driven individual. And one of the hardest things to teach voiceover talent is to communicate with a sense of mission and purpose. But you're somebody who already understands that concept. And of course, here we see the picture of the young lady who's making all these different faces and expressing different aspects of her personality. So you've already overcome a pretty big hurdle just by virtue of your background in ministry work. You understand what it means to connect with a message, to own that message, and to communicate, again, with a sense of purpose and with a sense of mission. And the people that can do that behind a microphone with a script can be very successful in voiceover. As I mentioned, I do have some background in ministry work. I've done a number of things. I've worked in radio, been a teacher, college professor, business consultant, but I've also worked as a youth pastor. Been a Christian radio programmer, but also a worship leader. So I've spent a lot of time on the platform in front of people, communicating and connecting, whether it be through words or whether it be through music. And again, as a kindred spirit, I understand what it means to be purpose-driven, to be missional in our message, and I cannot emphasize that enough. And I know Fred will vouch for me when we're in coaching sessions and I'm working with people that are in my private coaching group. I'm always preaching to them to take ownership of the script and to communicate it with a sense of purpose and with a sense of mission and with a sense of urgency. So again, that's something that you get. And here's the kicker. It never occurred to me that my extensive background in ministry work would be such a huge advantage to me in voiceover. And really, it's over time as I've built my business and I've reflected on the things that have really catapulted me and helped me to achieve things I never dreamed possible. Working in that kind of context where again I'm speaking and communicating from my heart with a sense of purpose and urgency and mission. That's what I bring to work every day. That's what I do when I get behind this microphone. And that is why people hire me, but not only hire me, but they rehire me again and again. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I want to talk a little bit, first of all, about why voiceover is a great option. What of all the things that you could be doing, of all of the home-based businesses that you could consider, why is voiceover such a great option? And we could certainly talk about, it's great to work from home, be close to your refrigerator, or maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but there are things I really enjoy about being home. I mean, it's convenient, right? It's just convenient to be here. But beyond that, the industry itself, there are some very compelling reasons to get involved in voiceover. And one of the big reasons is that it's an ever growing marketplace. And there's a very simple reason for that. And that is that media content is exploding. And the reason for that is because it is cheap and easy to create. I mean, think about it. 20 years ago, where was YouTube? Where was we have if there was no place to, I mean, even a world without YouTube is even hard to imagine. But 20 years ago, I don't think there was a YouTube, was there? I think that's come around in the last 15 years or so. But there's a
Oh,
reason for that. Does that sound about right to you, Fred?
yeah, that's it.
It's so cheap and easy to create content. If it's on your phone, on your pad device, on your computer, we have software programs that allow us to not only create media, but to make it look professional. I mean, so you can sit in your living room or in your basement or in your bedroom with a laptop computer and create pretty amazing stuff. And that has not gone unnoticed. And there's an entire industry that has sprung up around that. Explainer videos, these 3-minute online commercial type things where every business now can promote themselves using an explainer video. That is a huge market for voiceover work. And it's not just that, it's the explosion of video games. It's the explosion of the audiobook market. Content is just, it's like a mushroom cloud that does not quit growing. It continues to expand. And as the content grows in volume, so goes the demand for voiceover work because much, if not most of that work requires voice. So there, it will, I see no end in sight. I cannot imagine a day when demand will slow down. I can only see it increasing, in the years to come. There's another compelling reason why voiceover is a really great option for a home-based business. And that is, especially for those of us, again, who come from a background of ministry and teaching and communicating, the majority of voiceover jobs out there are instructional content. Now, that might be news to you. When you ask people if they've ever heard of voiceover work or what they think of when they think of voiceover work, most people will say things like movie trailers in a world, those kind of things, or the promos they hear on radio or television, or video games, cartoon voices, commercials, those kind of things. And certainly, I mean, that's voiceover work. But that is like the small tip of the iceberg. The vast majority of the work out there is instructional in nature, children's material, pharmaceutical and healthcare. I was telling Fred earlier today that about half of all of the work that I do would fall under the pharma and healthcare industry, whether I do lots of commercials for hospital systems, around the country, but I do internal work for just about, I mean, you name a pharmaceutical company, I either am currently working for them or I have in the not so distant past. That's a big part of what I do. Industrial and manufacturing sector safety training, for industrial settings or for all kinds of different settings. That's a huge market and niche within voiceover. Sales training. I was just doing a sales training program, I think it was yesterday, for people who sell cruises. Yeah, I mean, that's a thing. But if you think about it, I mean, there's sales training for just about everything imaginable. HR related training. Just today, I recorded several projects that were related to open enrollment that come from the HR departments of these various companies. As a matter of fact, this is open enrollment season. October, November is very busy in terms of creating training content for employees so they understand how to manage and sign up for their benefits. And that has been a huge source of income for me over the past few weeks and will continue for the next month or so. So again, outside of some of the obvious reasons why it's nice to work from home, why it's great to work in voiceover specifically is because the market's not slowing down. It's only expanding. And there is a vast universe of content that's related to the communication of information and education, which I think is a perfect fit for folks like us. Some important lessons, some important things I think that we've all learned, those of us involved in ministry. And that is we understand the context of a message. A message does not exist in a vacuum. And when somebody throws a script at you or at me, we have to understand and think about, well, where does this fit? It's like, if you think about it, it's like if you're doing a Bible study, for instance, context is really important. You can't just pull a verse out and then kind of base your entire life around a sentence without understanding the context in which it was set. And it's the same thing in voiceover. So that's one of the things when I'm working with my students, I help them to understand, what is the story? What's going on around the story? Who are you within the story? Who are you talking to? What's driving this? What are we trying to accomplish? So understanding that, and again, that's part of what you do. Understanding the importance of the message, the urgency of the message, having a sense of, I mentioned being, missional in this, knowing that it's important that the person on the other side of that microphone hear and pay attention to the message, and then making that message personal. And learning how to make it personal when it's not personal. For instance, if you're doing a commercial for, I don't know, pick anything. Let's say you're doing a commercial for a Chevrolet, which is something that I've done. But you don't like Chevrolets, you like Fords, and I like Fords as well. How do you make it personal? How do you own that message when you really don't particularly care for it? And there are strategies for that, and that's part of what I work with my students. But owning the message, communicating from your heart and not your head. One of the biggest hurdles for a lot of people, most people, when they get into voiceover, is they overly think from their head. They analyze. They take the message and they analyze it to death. How fast should I speak? How should I pace myself? Where should I pause? What should I emphasize? Instead of understanding, we're communicating meaning. We're communicating intent. We oftentimes are trying to move people in a direction, to take action of some sort. And then being a great storyteller, which you all are, or you wouldn't be involved in the work that you are. And so when it comes to delivering a voice-over read, which is what we do, that's how we get paid. The goal is this. Let me just reverse engineer it for you so you can understand how this all works. The goal is this, ultimately. The listener has to believe you. Nothing happens until somebody believes you when they hear you. If you record an audition and you send it out and the listener doesn't believe you, then you don't get hired. It's all about belief. And how does that happen? Well, to be believed, you have to allow the listener to feel something. In other words, if you don't evoke or stir some sort of emotion, and you understand this, those of you who are pastors, teachers, if you don't move something within their heart and mind, then if they don't feel something, they don't connect and they don't believe you. So you've got to get them to feel something. Well, how do you get them to feel something? You have to feel it when you read it. You have to make it personal. So it all begins, again, this is how we're just reverse engineering the process. You have to be believed. To be believed, they have to feel something. They don't feel it unless you feel it when you read it. And you don't feel it unless you make it personal. When I'm coaching somebody to do like a hospital commercial and they're speaking on behalf of the hospital, oftentimes a student the first time through, it'll be somewhat mechanical and they're trying to sound good and authoritative and sound believable. And by the way, there's no such thing as sounding believable. You either make somebody feel that or you don't. You can't sound good enough to make somebody believe you. And I will ask them, okay, so have you ever had a loved one in a hospital? Do you know what that feels like? Do you know what it feels like for a parent who has to, give up control of their child to allow themselves, access to a healthcare professional? I'll never forget the first time my youngest son, Alex, he had tubes taken out of his ears. It was a minor thing, but I'll never forget the feeling. He's 2 years old and he's being taken off to the operating room. Unless you feel that and you understand that, it is hard to communicate compassion and understanding to somebody else. But once you do, then all of this that you're seeing here on the screen, this begins to take place and people believe you. And so let me draw a little picture here for you, at least a little visual, a little graphic. So oftentimes, especially when people first come to voiceover, and by the way, this is really great instruction in terms of giving a proper voiceover read, because this is a very common issue. People tend to view voiceover like this picture you see, them on stage in front of an audience with a curtain behind them and a microphone, and they're announcing and communicating and talking at the audience, to the back of the room specifically. But that doesn't connect with listeners. That's not how you're believable. You're believable when you're the person that's back behind the curtain and you're looking up. Imagine you're in a movie theater and you're watching the movie, you're watching the story as the people are watching the story. But what you're doing is you're sharing the story with them as you watch it. So you're not the story, you're facilitating the story. And it's a completely different thing. And once you understand, if this little simple thing that you've just seen, once you get that, that's your key to getting more and more voiceover work once you get the opportunity, to audition. So let's talk about a few things you need. And again, as I mentioned, I'm going to give you plenty of time to ask questions. So make sure you make note, or actually you can just go into the question box and begin to enter those questions if you'd like to. So a few things that you'll need. And first of all, let's see here. You will need some basic computer skills. So I always tell people, if you have zero computer skills, I mean, like for instance, you don't know how to boot up a computer and run Microsoft Word, for instance, you probably need to go to a local community college and take a computer class, because voiceover work is done from home and it's done around a computer. Your life revolves around a computer in voiceover work. So that's something, and most people already do have basic computer skills. But if you literally can't turn on a computer and run Microsoft Word, then you need to go to a class to learn that. But if you understand that, the rest you can learn. You will need to learn some basic audio editing skills, how to record and edit audio. However, again, if you have basic computer skills, this can be learned. And this is something I work with my students on and teach them. And yeah, it feels a little, I'll never forget the first time I began working with a computer and audio. I thought it felt so weird and felt so foreign. I thought I'd never learn it. And then 2 weeks later, I'm flying through it. It's just something, once you're exposed to it, it's not that difficult, but it's something you'll need to learn. Also, marketing skills, because nothing happens until you get yourself in front of prospective clients. And so learning and understanding who those people are, who is your audience, where do they congregate, and I don't necessarily mean physically. Most times it's virtually. Where do they congregate? Get together online or look for voiceover work, that kind of thing, so that you can get in front of them. And then learning the performance skills, what we just talked about. When it comes to your home recording setup, I wanted to share a little bit with you. What you see here is very basically what my setup looked like when I first started in voiceover. I operated out of my home closet, and that's, by the way, that's not a picture of my closet. Was actually smaller than that. I operated out of my home closet with a computer and a microphone. And the advantage that we have today over what I had when I first started is now there's better technology, better equipment that's cheaper. And so, for instance, what you're looking at, this picture, and I'll share this with you again later, so you can write this down. I'll write it on the screen so you'll see it a little bit later. It's called a Fifine or Fifine K670 microphone. Fine K670. You can buy it on Amazon for $49 or $50. And again, I'll write that down for you before the webinar is over. But it's inexpensive, but I own this microphone. It's a great sounding microphone, and it's a USB microphone, which means you can plug it directly into your computer without an interface or a preamp. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about, all you need to understand is that it's an extra piece of equipment you would need. But with this type of microphone, you don't need that extra equipment, keeping things less expensive and simpler. So with this basic setup, you can literally, from my closet, I was recording national TV commercials. It makes me laugh when I think about it, because who would ever think you could sit in your closet and record national TV commercials? It still boggles my mind that we can do this from our home and have such a wide and broad impact. I mean, 25% of my work is outside of the US, most of it for European clients, but literally I work for clients all over the world all day long from my home. It still boggles my mind. And so let me just share this with you. How much time, and I think this is an important question to ask yourself, how much time can you invest? If this is something that you're thinking about doing, how much time can you put into it? And not to worry about how much time, but just be honest with how much you can, because a lot of people come into this thinking they have to make it a full-time thing right away, which you absolutely do not. Most of my students that I work with do not start full-time. They've got other jobs and other careers. Some who want to keep those careers and they're kind of looking ahead to retirement, or they do this as a part-time thing. Some of them want to be rid of their jobs. They don't like their work. They're frustrated or disillusioned or whatever, and they're working to make it their full, or make voiceover their full time. But what I always tell them is, whether you have 15 minutes a day or you've got 2 hours a day, if you have a plan, you can build a voiceover business. And obviously, the more hours you can put in, assuming you have a plan, you're working a proper plan, the faster you're going to build that business. But I just wanted to let you know that it doesn't matter whether it's a few minutes or it's a number of hours. If you have a plan, you can begin, even if slowly, you can begin to build a voiceover income. And Fred, this might be a good point to open things up for questions, or if there's anything you think I should elaborate on.
Well, I think that one of the things you may want to mention is the fact that we all know that people in this line of work are so incredibly well paid that they probably don't want to consider an additional income source.
Oh yeah, that's why did we even bother doing this?
Exactly.
That's right. Ministers are loaded. Absolutely. It's interesting. Quick story. One of my best friends, he's a pastor, and he's 60. We were roommates in college. And he just turned, I think he's like 61 years old, and he was downsized out of an administrative position within the denomination he's in. And so he's been out shopping. He just found a church, but I feel for him. It doesn't get easier the older you get. People tend to want young pastors. And so this can be, and I've told him, I said, let me work with you, because this could be a godsend for him and anybody else like him.
Yeah, the other thing that I thought of, Bill, is that earlier today, I looked into what the cost of the average franchise was to get started. And the average franchise was running anywhere between $100,000 and $150,000. So if you want to start your own business and wanted to select this one, your costs would be super minimal. Why don't you remind people of how much you spent when you first got started?
I had a grand total of about $300 all in. I mean, that was my initial investment, which is nothing close to 100 to 150. Or a McDonald's franchise, if you want to be guaranteed $100,000 a year income as a McDonald's franchise owner, you're talking about $1 million in. I mean, that's just, and I almost said that's nuts. It's not nuts. I mean, it's a legitimate business choice, but the idea of coming up with $1 million, that's the nutty part of it.
Yeah, keep going. We'll wait for some questions. I've got a couple of them here. Computer-wise, Michael's asking, computer-wise, laptop or desktop, Apple or Windows?
It doesn't matter. I've done both in either. I've used Windows. I used Windows extensively, probably the first, I don't know, 5 or 6 years I did this. I've been using Mac for the past 10 years.
Until you met
And
me, I remember.
yeah, Fred kind of turned me on to Mac, and I like Mac for video production. I mean, they're both great. I mean, I have no complaints about either. And no, I've used a MacBook Pro. Right now, I'm using an iMac. I've used a Dell desktop. I used a Windows 95 machine for years. I mean, you can use just about anything.
Yeah, you really can. You don't have to buy any new computer equipment. Chances
No,
are, whatever you have is more than sufficient, right?
absolutely.
Question from Jason here. And Jason, by the way, this was not a setup, Bill. He says, besides just starting out, how do I get a proper plan?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Jason. Um, well, in all full disclosure here, the purpose of this is to answer questions, to give you information, to find out if you're interested in building a voiceover business. That is something that I do offer, and we're going to go into more details in just a few minutes and give you a chance to, if you want to learn more about it, a chance to set up a phone call to do that. But I do have a program called the Voiceover Blueprint, and Should I get into that in detail right now, or are
I've
there
got
more questions right
a
now?
couple more first here.
Okay, we'll do that, and then we'll get into that.
Steve is asking, what's the best way you've experienced to get in front of prospective clients? Again, something we talk about in this program, but why don't you give a couple of ideas there?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so many ways. Today with my coaching group, we're talking about direct marketing. Yeah, I've got one student who wants to go out, and knock on doors of production houses, which is fine. It's one of the more inefficient ways of doing it. But there's online casting sites. There are talent agencies. There are production houses that you can work with. There's so many. It's so much easier now than it used to be. But there are a lot of different ways to do it.
And Joe asks, what is there a particular place to find religious-based VO work? You should address that as well.
It's interesting. I've never sought for religious-based VO work, although I've like the first audiobook I ever recorded was for Andy Stanley. It's one of Andy Stanley's books. I work for the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. I record their like TV promos. That's one of my regular clients. And I've done and others. I've had that opportunity. So here's the thing. Here's what I don't want to sound like a mercenary, but if you focus solely on ministry work, you're working with a very limited pool, and that's fine. And you can Google and find production houses, media production facilities that specialize in religious type material. But would you be opposed to doing safety training, industrial safety training or explainer videos? There's a lot of good work out there, even outside of that. So I would just encourage you to for financial purposes, to keep your mind open to other possibilities so you can better support yourself.
And one of the things that we do for all of our members of this Blueprint program, folks, is we have regular webinars like this one, but answering questions. And earlier today, it came up, Bill, and we talked about it. And why don't you address the issue of material that you may not feel comfortable with?
Yeah, I do get asked that quite frequently, and my answer to that was in the 14 years I've been recording voiceovers, I've only said no twice to voiceover work. And by the way, it's your business. First of all, you have to understand this is your business. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. You don't. I was once asked to do a commercial for a strip club. I'm not comfortable with that. I turned that down. And I was asked to do it was a book. It was a political book, which I record commercials for Republicans and Democrats come election season. I don't have any problem with that. This book seemed okay. It was written by a Republican, a conservative, which again, it didn't matter to me, but I didn't see anything that to be wary of until I got the full script. And it was one of the nastiest, most vile books I'd ever read in language and in intent. And I finally, I contacted the publisher and said, and I can't in good conscience read this. So there've been a couple times, but again, it's your business. If there's anything, if you don't like to do commercials for grocery stores, if you're morally opposed to grocery stores, I'm being silly, but the point is, you don't have to do it.
Or
Totally up to you.
cigarettes or tobacco?
Yeah, yeah, and that would probably be something to be a little more realistic. I'm just being goofy when I say, grocery stores, but whatever, doesn't matter. You don't have to do it.
So Aaron says, and I like this, Aaron has a unique line of ministry, which is puppeteering. I'm
Yeah.
also considering launching a podcast and would welcome input to get started and improve. Well, podcasting and puppeteering probably aren't super lucrative in and of themselves, whereas with voiceover, you can really build a nice side income, right?
Yeah, and with podcasting, you need to ask yourself, why are you doing the what's the intent of the podcast? What are you trying to create with that? And if you're looking to create, income to support yourself, as Fred said, I think voiceover is extremely viable option for you.
Now, John is asking a question that I know what you and I will both answer, having to do with business setup. What should you be, an LLC, et cetera? Neither Bill or I are lawyers, nor do we play them on TV or radio. So I think it's probably best for you to talk to local professionals, both tax and legal, in your own area, John.
There's no one answer that's best for everybody. It depends on a number of things.
Michael's asking about pricing and how much do you charge for a voiceover script? What is it dependent on, Bill?
How much you got? I'm kind of kidding. Um, it would be, and I do have a rate sheet, but I mean, that's asking that is like asking, well, I can't think of a good example, but it's a very broad question. It depends on a lot of things. What's the project? How long is the project? Are you directing me in a live session, or am I reading it on my own? How many people will be seeing this? What platforms will it be on? And again, these are things that we work with our students to help them understand how to how to negotiate and how to get the best rates. And that's something I've had to learn along the way, was how to negotiate and get the best rates that I can.
But the one thing I'm sure we can tell people in general is what you were charging when you first started is very different than what you're charging now.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You earn what you're worth. Essentially, the market will tell you what you're worth. When you're first starting off, and before we've developed our skills, we're not going to get the same amount as after you've done this for a while and you get better at it, and you can command higher rates because basically, you're auditioning for your livelihood. You read for things, and clients, if they like you and think you're best for the job, they'll hire you. So that's how you find out what you're worth. And I remember I used to be terrified to audition for more than $100 jobs. That was like top end for me. And if it was beyond that, I just thought, because I had a hard time getting those jobs. Well, nowadays, like today, I just auditioned for, well, I'm doing a project now. It's like a $12,000 job. I'm up for a Cocoa Puffs commercial, and it's an online one. This is not TV broadcast yet. And it only pays like 1,300 bucks ish if I were to get it. So, and again, when I first started, there's no way I would be able to compete for this stuff the first year or two.
Yeah, and I like to use the analogy of baseball where you have minor league and major leagues, and you want to
Yeah.
start in minors. And I'm reminded because I met a minor league ball player that couldn't afford to pay his rent with just his minor league salary. He worked an additional job as well. So that's
Yes.
everybody's got to start at the bottom in
And I
every.
will, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I will add this. The one major difference is that with the minor league baseball player, there's a very limited number of roster spots in the
Aha.
big leagues. But in
Very
voiceover,
true.
that's wide open.
Very true. Yeah, and the thing about it is also is that we also find, and I'm a lot of the time here in the Las Vegas area. Bryce Harper, who moved to the Phillies, was a standout and hired right out of high school to work in Major League Baseball. There are some people who come into our group that move slowly along, making more and more each month, and there's others who rocket way up to the top very quickly. You want to address that? And that what's the difference there?
Well, it's a function of how much time you can put into it. That's a big part of it. And the other is how quickly you adapt and learn to this, because we all learn things at a different pace. For some people, this is, and again, working in ministry work already, you already have a good idea of this. A lot of people struggle with the initial idea of communicating with emotion. That's one of the biggest hurdles I have to help people overcome. So, there's that, developing the talent, the tools, the time that you have, and but it really doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter. The winner is the person who gets to where they want to go, whether it takes them a month or whether it takes them 3 months. Or everybody can make money in voiceover. That's the beautiful thing. I tell people within the first month you should be making some money, income, and then
Yeah.
after the first year you should be seeing some pretty significant results.
Yeah, and many of our students in the blueprint are making money by the end before the end of the first week sometimes, Bill.
Yeah, and there's a guy that we talked to, Fred and I talked to. Oh, this is a little while back, and I think Matthew, I think it was his name. He's a youth pastor, is why I bring him up. But he was sharing with us that within a year he had built a six-figure voiceover income. But he had to hustle, because those of you guys who work in youth ministry, you know what that's like. That's not a 9 to 5 job. That's going on like all the time. But yet he was able to find time to squeeze in voiceover and build a significant income in addition to his youth pastor work.
Yeah, we have a question from Steve, and he'll like the answer. Some decent, easy to understand editing software that you like.
I like Adobe Audition. That's my favorite. Now, you'll pay for that. It's $20 a month to buy that from Adobe Audition. You essentially lease it. It's software as a service. There's a free software program called Audacity. If you want to start with that, you can simply go online, Google it, Google Audacity, and then download it. You can put it on your Mac or your Windows PC, and it's great too.
Rick has a question, and we can use a good story that we've spoken of before here to answer it. He says, how do we find out if we have the right kind of voice before going too far into this process? So what I'd like you to relate to Rick is the story of the guy you did the demo for and what happened.
Yeah, several years ago, I was producing. I produce voiceover demos for voiceover talent as well, and I've done hundreds of demos. And I was producing one gentleman in particular, didn't have a background in voiceover. His background was business, but he wanted to get into voiceover. So um, coached him, recorded the demo, and I remember after wrapping up work on it, thinking, I mean, he struggled through it. It wasn't easy for him to do this. We really had to work really hard, and he wasn't the slickest. He didn't have the best voice. He wasn't the most polished. Um, and I wondered and worried, did I do him a disservice? Because I would never want to take somebody's money if I can't deliver, the goods. And I'll never forget, a few months later, he contacted me and said, I just want to let you know that things are going so well for me in voiceover. I've had to hire an assistant to help me because I cannot handle the volume of work. This is not about your voice. That's the thing you've got to understand. It's not about your voice. All you have to do is listen to a few TV commercials to understand this is, you hear all kinds of voices. This is about two things. Number one, learning how to connect with people on an emotional level. I don't care what you sound like. If you can do that, you're gold. The other thing is learning how to market yourself and getting in front of these people. That's really where the day-to-day work, where the rubber meets the road in voiceover.
Jason's asking, is it good to do pro bono work when first starting out to just get your voice out there?
Well, there's no value to getting your voice out there that I'm aware of. I mean, no, I've never heard of anybody ever being accidentally discovered that way. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing it. If you want to do it because it's practice for you, that's great. But don't have any expectation that something magical will happen. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but it's not, a lot of people say, well, hey, if you do this job for me, I can't pay you, but I'll give you credit. Well, that's not really worth much anything.
And
But if you want to do it, do it.
there's enough business out there that you can get paid even for small jobs. So
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
in Dave's question, I'm going to alter a little bit here, Dave, if you don't mind. And since I'm reading it and you can't talk, I'm going to do that. If you feel too self-conscious to do the marketing, why don't you tell people about the marketing method? Does this involve a lot of super high sales ability?
No, it doesn't. I'm glad you asked that question because this is perfect for people who feel self-conscious. This is not about you putting yourself in a position that feels awkward or embarrassing or intimidating. And believe me, I put myself through college, at least in part, by selling books door to door, Bibles specifically in the summertime. Hardest job I've ever had, ever, ever. That was hard. I have never in my 14 years of voiceover asked somebody to hire me. I've never put them in a position of having to tell me yes or no. What I have done is I've asked people if they're accepting demos. And you don't even have to do that. You can do that through email. It doesn't have to even be through a telephone call. So there are plenty of ways to market yourself without ever talking to somebody.
I've got John's question here I can answer because I spoke to someone 2 days ago that'll help give me the answer here. So he says, how do I market myself without having a demo or a website? First off, let me just answer the part of that to say that you can start out not with a fancy professionally produced demo, which I don't want you to do, and Bill certainly wouldn't want you to do till later, but you can do a DIY, a do-it-yourself demo. Now,
Yeah.
I spoke to, and I think this is the lady who I tried to get you on the phone with that time where I missed you. And and it was Anna now, I remember her name. So Anna got on the phone with me and was telling me about how she'd done some work for one of the pay to play sites, doesn't have a website, doesn't have a demo, just did an audition. So, John, in answer to your question, do you need a demo to get work? The answer is no.
Correct.
Uh,
Correct. And yeah, that's one of the great things about voiceover these days too.
Okay, Aaron, how would I go about getting started in audiobooks, or what resources? Why don't you talk a little bit about audiobooks as a place to start, but maybe not a place to end?
Yeah, if you're looking at the ladder of voiceover work income wise, audiobook's going to be at the bottom. It's going to be the lower end of the pay scale, unless you're doing a New York Times bestseller. But there's only 100 of those at any given time, and those go. You have to have massive experience and a track record and a great agent to do that, which is something to aspire to, but that's not where you start. Um, with audiobooks, I mean, you can go to acx.com, owned by Amazon, and there's a number, usually 1,500 books at any given time are up for audition on there just to get started. And again, in my class, in my program, we teach you the specifics of recording and editing and marketing, audiobook publishers and that kind of thing. But that's a great way to start is just go to the website.
Got it. Okay, so Brian's asking, are there roster sites to connect with?
We have bunches of them. That's how I got started. I mean, man, absolutely.
And Dave is asking, and by the way, we're fully transparent here, Dave, so we're not going to hide anything from you. How much is one of Bill's demos? When you produce demos, Bill, what do you charge people?
Yeah, like for the commercial demo, I charge $2,500, and if they do a narration demo the same time, we charge 50% for the second demo, and that includes, it's not just the demo. There's training involved on the front end, and then market training done on the back end.
At what point should a voiceover talent even consider getting a professional demo? Should they do that right away?
A rule of thumb that we use in the Blueprint program was we tell people once you've earned enough money to pay for a demo through voice work, that's a good time to spend the money. You've earned $2,500, $3,000 in voice work, you're ready to do a pro demo. Or if you
Yeah.
just got a ton of money burning a hole in your pocket and you want to get to it right now.
Yeah, let me give you the two examples. I mean, I spoke to a guy who's a retired corporate exec, had $650,000 sitting around in his 401k, wanted to do demo, just getting started. We said, hey, go nuts if you want to. But for most people, the idea here is to make your money and use the money that you make on the front end to then be able to parlay that into a real professional demo.
Yes.
I got somebody knocking on the door here, so take a thing here, and I'll open that for him.
Okay, and I can't take questions because I'm not an administrator on this, so
Oh,
I'm going to kind of.
Hold on a second here. Now let me just.
That's right.
Yeah. So then somebody will. Okay. So why don't we look at the next item here and skip to. Let me let Sabrina know somebody's here. Hold on.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up, I've talked about my program, and I'll take just a moment to share that with you so you understand what it is, to see if it's something you even want to find out more about. But if you're thinking and considering voiceover, and again, I think being somebody who works in ministerial work, I think you're a strong candidate simply because of your background and experience in that. The Blueprint program was designed as, think of it as voiceover university. It's just not a coaching session, not even just a coaching program. This is a full-blown A to Z training, mentoring, and coaching program. It's over 70 hours of actual training, which I've created that's on-demand streaming. So everything from how do I set up my studio, how do I record audio, how do I edit audio, how do I market myself? What are the different ways to market myself? How do I perform when I get behind a microphone? I mean, 70 plus hours. There's a lot of training there. So it's you've got the whole, and there's a path, a learning path. Start at A and you start heading towards Z, but you take it at a pace that works for you.
Okay.
And then, okay, yeah, I'm just going through the blueprint.
Yeah.
70 plus hours of training, which I just mentioned. And then we provide 15 hours of live group coaching per month. And that's a pretty big deal. 15 hours of live interactive group coaching. And we do it through this webinar format. Like today, and Fred assists in all of these. Well, I shouldn't say all, but in a lot of the coaching sessions. And like earlier today, we had a number of people on where we can open up their microphone and they can read and I can coach them. And so we give lots of opportunities to do that.
Yeah, we get that question quite a bit where somebody says, do I get any personal coaching? And the answer is yes and no. So why don't you explain my answer there, Bill?
Yeah, the program is not designed for you and I to do one-on-one coaching, just because I'm a full-time voiceover talent, and to be able to coach all the people one-on-one on top of that in my group, it just would be impossible. However, it's very effective for us to get together as a group. And when you can attend a live session, you have lots of opportunities. As a matter of fact, Thursday night, there is simply a performance webinar. There's one just for audio and tech support. The one we did earlier today, that was Q&A plus performance. And I mean, there's marketing. There's one we do just for those who want to work off Fiverr. There's just lots of opportunities for live interactive coaching and feedback.
And before anybody goes, if they have to leave early, I'm going to put a link in here to a YouTube video in which we went through a complete description of what's in this Blueprint program. It's about 55 minutes. We go through it soup to nuts. So since Bill can, I mean, here that these are the components, and you may want to go through theirs. But remember, what Bill is doing here is an overview, and that program goes through the nitty gritty, each individual component. So go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
Good, good. Thanks for sharing that. The only other part, and and then we'll just make this the last thing, and that is, in addition to the streaming 70 plus hours of training, in addition to the 15 hours of live group coaching per month, I have a private Facebook community, private Facebook group that you would be in. And this group provides support and encouragement for each other, which is great and helpful. And, there are times when you have questions, you need help, and you can post those, and I can get on there or somebody else can get on there and help you with that. But I think the really cool thing about it is that I do something that's unusual. I'm not aware of anybody else in the industry that does this. And that is I live stream from my studio. I sit in here, I turn on my camera, and I also share my desktop so you can see that. And as I work, I share it. You can watch. I record 5 to 10 jobs a day. I am literally a full-time working voiceover talent. I do a lot of work. Now, some things I do, a lot of pharmaceutical work is under, non-disclosures. I can't share all of that. But today I think I've got 4 or 5 live things that, if you were to log in, you would see them in the Facebook group. And they're archived once they're done. So they're there. You can go back and see them if you weren't there live. And there's probably a couple thousand hours anyhow of streaming video of me working in the studio, doing auditions, editing, marketing, talking to clients, doing directed sessions. So it's a chance not only for me to tell you how to do it, it's a chance for me to show you and you to see it in real time how it actually works. And there is no place else where you can get that. And so
Yeah,
that's what it consists of.
it's kind of interesting because whenever I talk to people over the phone, and if you do get together with me over the phone, I will remind you that there is no one else in the industry that allows you to watch them live in the studio every day as long as Bill isn't under a non-disclosure agreement. And it always it begs the question, well, why wouldn't anyone compete against us, against Bill, to do and show what they're doing? And the answer is, my suspicion is that many people say they're getting work, but in actual fact, they aren't. And so they're doing voiceover coaching to supplement their voiceover work business. And oftentimes that becomes their only business. And so they're a little bit possibly embarrassed to show that they're sitting around waiting for work.
I love the model of it's like a university hospital setting. This is a real business with real clients, real work is going on, but you get a chance to follow along on rounds and watch as I work.
Okay, so let me see what other questions. Monica, the course cost is something we'll discuss on the call. It certainly can be done as a full one-time shot. It's not cheap, I'll tell you that, but it can be broken up into payments. It's a program. Well, I'll answer. I won't answer you directly, but I'll answer it this way. We find that most people, if they work this, and I always have to do it in terms of number of hours a week. Could you go back to that slide if you would, Bill?
Yep.
Let me give Monica an answer this way. And this is, by the way, how I've been doing it, Bill. If you were to do this full-time, 40 hours a week, my guess is you could break even on the cost of this program within 4 to 5 months. If you're doing it 20 hours a week, it might take you 6 to 8 months. If you're doing it 10 hours a week, maybe a year. Now, again, this all depends on your work ethic, your tenacity, your talent, all kinds of things that I don't have any control over. I'm just giving you some averages. So now ask yourself the question, how many businesses out there that you can start from your home, can you break even? And then now what you paid for the program, there's a small recurring fee that we do yearly, but it's small compared to the cost of the program. And you then have a business that will take you literally. I mean, Bill, what do you think? I'm serious here. What age do you think you'll end up retiring at if you were guessing?
Oh, wow. I think about that a lot. Because I think I can do it as long as I want to. I mean, there's no reason. There are people who do this in their 90s, so there's no reason to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's the answer, I guess.
Yeah, I think the answer is it depends on, if you're enjoying it. Like my dad worked every day of his life till he was into his late 80s. And I mean, I'm always amazed. I'm about to go to this big fancy reunion. I grew up overseas, and it's funny to me that people are bragging about retirement, to which I always say, oh, I'm so sorry you didn't find what you love to do. Because to me, retirement just means that you weren't really enthralled with the work you were doing, right?
I suppose so. And the thing is, I've got options. I've got options, and it's great. Voiceover, I can do it if I want to do it part time, and then travel or what you play golf, I can. If I want to do this all day long, I can. It's extremely flexible in that way. And it's mobile too.
And Monica's follow-up to her original question on pricing was, how do you protect your voice with all that VO work? What about protection for your, I think she means in terms of making sure you don't strain your.
Yeah, well, I try to take care of myself in terms of, get plenty of sleep and I hydrate, but I don't have any, real regimented thing that I follow. I just try not to be crazy. When the weather's bad, I try to be sensitive and not expose myself to the elements when I don't need to if it's really particularly bad. But it really doesn't require any special care.
Yeah. Go back to the slide that details what's in the blueprint, Michael. In answer to your question, that 70 hours of training is the on-demand streaming training that is there for you forever once you're a member of the program, and you can access 70 plus hours of online video training. Now, we then have 15 hours of live coaching per month in the form of webinars. So
Right.
I hope that answers it
Oh,
for
and
you.
you know what? I mentioned I would put that microphone down for you. It's the Fifine K670. It's on Amazon if you want, or
Yeah, I put
670.
that in the chat box as well, but please do there.
Okay.
Good. And Thomas, your question regarding taxes again, we don't want to give out legal or financial advice, just not what we do because that's not our expertise. So there you have it. I mean, again, Bill, we're getting close to the end of our time, and I think we've reached almost all the questions. So what would you say as a final thought as it relates to those people who are considering this possibly either full or part-time?
If the idea of recording voiceover is remotely interesting to you and you want to find out more, it really is important that you get into a good program that will really lay out a path for you. So I would just say, give us a chance to talk. Let's just find out where you're at, what you want to accomplish, and we can share more details, answer questions about the blueprint. So just go to theblueprintcall.com, schedule the call. It doesn't cost you anything, and that way you'll know. And I love helping make people successful in voiceover.
But one thing I would do first is, and let me put it up one more time here, is before you make the call to me and schedule it on the blueprintcall.com, go ahead and go through this description of what's in there so that the time that we spend on the call is not taken up asking questions about that, but getting more into exactly what the program entails. I just want to make sure you do that because I think you'll have a much better insight that way.
Perfect. Sounds good. And again, thank you for being here tonight. I know time is precious and we appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thanks, folks. We'll see you again soon.
Okay, bye-bye.